Okay. I just called the Atheist Experience earlier this evening. Check it out. I'm not sure. I think I'm the third caller, but the first two callers talked for quite a while. So, the first thing I addressed to Matt was first thing I want to say is I'm not trying to win an argument here. I'm not trying to be right. I want to try to get to the bottom of everything, and just be honest as I can. The caller before me was talking about how atheism is a claim. If you're rejecting God, it's basically you're claiming that God doesn't exist, and you're making a claim. And Matt brought up this whole scenario of going to court. The evidence, the people making the claim of guilt, the burden is on them to prove that the other person is guilty. And I agree. And so the people who are not guilty, they don't call themselves not guiltiest. They don't go around basically proving a negative and labeling themselves as that. And that's true. You don't see that. But what I'm saying is, it seems like a lot of times atheists will always try to hide behind weak atheism, but they don't live like they're weak atheists. It's true that the not guilty party, they don't go around calling themselves "we're not guilty," but they also don't go around making shows on cable access channels saying, "This is the not guilty show. We're going to spend 2 hours on why we're not guilty." The Atheism Experience does that, so they can hide behind weak atheism in statement, but indeed they're not doing that. Indeed, they are making claims. They have a show about this. I mean, they're making claims quite a bit. So I totally don't agree with that. It's just a lack of belief. You're not living like it's a lack of belief. You're making claims. What was the other thing he said? I can't remember. Anyways, we got into... I started off questioning him if God was improbable. And I want you guys to listen to the broadcast, and if there's anything I'm saying that's not correct, or if I'm not stating what we actually said, just get back with me on that. Anyways, we got into if God was improbable. Then they asked for a definition of God, and I gave them the typical Judeo-Christian attributes of God. You know, he's eternal, all-powerful, intelligent, maximally great being. Basically, that was my definition of God, just a quick definition. And it didn't get down to, they think he's improbable. They think he's impossible because he's contradictory and theology-wise. Like we got on the subject of redemption, and Matt brought up an example of how can a rapist on his deathbed by faith become saved, whereas the girl, the victim, is cannot believe and still go to hell. That's not justice. And the thing I pointed out to Matt is, since we're presupposing God already, we are already presupposing God in our conversation. He is having a problem with how God works his justice, or how God is determining sin and whatnot, who's guilty and who's not. So I brought up to him that if we're presupposing God already, we're saying that God has a standard. He doesn't like murder and rape. And basically what Matt is saying is that the standard ends there. It doesn't go beyond that to the rest of us. And if we're going to presuppose God and we're going to say what God is saying, you know, what typically comes out of the Bible, then we need to go with the whole gamut, what it says. The Bible says we're all guilty. It's not that the rapists or murderers are they're the only guilty ones and we're not. The Bible says none are sinless. We all sin. And I'm not saying all sins are the same as far as... I'm not saying murder is the same thing as lying. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, if God has the right to judge a murderer or a rapist, who are you, when we're presupposing God, going to tell God he can only judge them but he can't judge me? And you'll hear Matt quote that. He has no right to judge me. If you're guilty, he does. And I asked Matt before they cut me off. I said, you know as well as I do, you have a conscience. You know when you do wrong. So I have half a mind when the show comes on again. I want to call back the show and simplify my point and just ask him a question. And here's the question I would ask: Matt, are you guilty? I'm not going to get into what you're guilty of or what makes it guilty or some kind of moral standard. I want to ask him, are you guilty? This isn't a guilt trip, but are you guilty? Have you ever been guilty of anything? All right? And I ask any atheist who's watching this, are you guilty? Okay. We all know we're guilty of something. You know, I'm not going to get into that. I don't want you confessing on YouTube what you've done. But I know I do stuff. I didn't need the Bible to tell me that I was guilty. I knew there was things I did that were wrong before I read the Bible. I just knew. So, 2 questions for Matt, 2 questions for anybody watching this. Are you guilty? Okay, the answer's in your head. Now, if the Judeo-Christian God exists, does he have a right to judge you? If you're guilty, does he? Or does he only have the right to judge rapists and murderers? That's what I'm saying. If we're already presupposing the Judeo-Christian God in conversation, you cannot get all pissed off because his judgment comes to your step and what you've done. We've all done something. So that's basically it. And I mean, I understand a lot of his objections. I'm not going to get into those things. I don't know. I don't know the certain answers for those things. But you can't, if we're going to presuppose God, you can't object to him because you don't like what he judges. And you'll hear Matt say that again. Like, he has no right to judge me. Why not? If he has every right to judge a murderer and rapist as you think he should, then what makes you think that his judgment can come to your doorstep? And while I'm at it too, there was another thing I wanted to bring up. He brought up a scenario of a mafia boss coming up to you with a baseball bat, threatening to break your legs or else. And he said Jesus was the or else. And I don't think that's an accurate representation of what's going on. And this is where they cut me off. I think what's going on is there's a mafia boss. You know it. He knows it. And he has every right to break your legs. You screwed him over, and he doesn't. In fact, it's the or else isn't you paying it. It's actually the or else is him paying for you to get let off. It's pure compassion. So if we're going to look at the Bible and say God is a mafia boss based on our interpretation of the Bible, we got to include the whole picture of what the Bible says. If God is a mafia boss, God is also paying your debt that you owe. So that's pretty much it. Listen to the show. It was recorded today, and today is May 31st. Just check it out. I just wish he would have let me finish. And again, what I would ask him is, are you guilty? If the Judeo-Christian God exists, does he have a right to judge you? That's it.